Hi guys, so this is basically gonna be an update video, both for the channel and for some of the shows I've watched, because I haven't done that for a while, where I talk about TV shows and stuff. So, my first thing is just that there won't be any April training for coming up, because last month I had a lot of track meets and stuff, finishing my track season, and this month I'm gonna have a lot of exams and grade stuff to worry about. So I figured I'd combine them into an April and May video. At the end of May I'll post it probably, or beginning of June, like I did for September and October last year. It'll be the same length as usual probably, but just condensed into 2 months, or expanded 2 months, I guess. So yeah, that's just because I usually post one every month. I just want to say that. And I'm probably gonna start posting less in the next few months as things get back to normal, hopefully. I know I've said that before, but I think this time it should come true, hopefully. Over the summer, maybe, we'll see. But it'll be a shame to stop posting on here, but it'll be worth it for sure, because this past year has been, not the best use of time, I don't think. So it'll be nice to get back to real life. It'll be good to get back to normal, not the new normal, but just normal, because it's been a while. So that'll be nice. But yeah, that'll be the reason if I stop posting as much, but I'll still keep posting on here. And yeah, so let's get to show updates. So my primary TV show thing to talk about this time is the new season of Wipeout, which it's kind of a negative review, just because it's not a horrible show in its own right, I think, but compared to the original show, it has a lot of not as good things, or just differences that don't, it doesn't fit well for a revival, I think. The first thing that everyone's talking about is the hosts are different. They replaced the two Johns with another John Cena, and Nicole Byer. And from what I read, which, it could be an unfair sample because these are the people that are really complaining about it, but from what I read, the hosts are really unpopular. And, I would definitely prefer the original Johns too. The new ones aren't I wouldn't say they're horrible, but they're definitely, they give it a different tone than the old hosts did. And for a lot of people, and me, I think a lot of the original show's appeal was having the hosts, the familiar hosts and the interaction and stuff. And, the jokes on the original show, I would say, are a lot more subtle. These ones are, it feels like they're trying too hard at some points, I think, which is what other people are saying. Plus now I think it's TV 14 or maybe 13, I'm not sure, but they've increased the rating level because they make a lot more inappropriate jokes too, explicitly inappropriate jokes this time, which a lot of people are complaining about too, because it seems forced to me, honestly. It just seems like it doesn't need to be done most of the time. Because the original show had jokes like that, but it wasn't so unnecessarily applied to the show. If you watch an episode of this, you'll know what I'm saying. It was funny in the first episode just because it was so different to the original show, but then it gets kind of old. It's not needed. I think it takes away from some of the stuff that could, relate to the course and to the people running it. So I think, it's different. But I would have stuck with the original format, especially since that's what people really liked about the original show, I think. Something that is kind of interesting, though, is that they're having the hosts live for the Wipeout Zone, which is different from the original because they were never actually there on set, except John Henson sometimes. So that's interesting. But it's kind of weird because, they mentioned that they're on, that they're live on the set for the Wipeout Zone, but it kind of ruins the illusion that they're there the whole time when they're pointing out that they're there for the Wipeout Zone. I mean, it's obvious that they're not there, but it's just kind of a weird difference, because they're supposed to be commentating live the whole time, but it's obviously only in the zone because you see the booth, but otherwise they're just the usual studio stuff afterward. So yeah, it's weird, but I kind of like having that there, and I think it's better maybe because it's unscripted. There's less it feels less awkward trying to fit in jokes and stuff. It's just natural commentary, which is good. I think the original show had a lot more just on the fly stuff. They wrote some of their jokes, but it was more less stage content. So I think it worked out better when they were saying it because it sounded more honest. It felt less forced, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I think that's one benefit of having the Wipeout Zone live. And even if they don't film the other rounds with the host on set, they could learn from that, playing too much kind of ruins it, I think. And, seeing the Wipeout Zone, how that works, could inspire that. What else? I'm trying to think. So another big change is that every single episode is a partners episode, and it's not like in the old show where they had like families episodes, couple episodes, exes and stuff like that. It's just they're all random pairings each week, which is kind of, I mean, my main issue is that it's always pairs, because I think having the individual episodes is better. You know, I'm fine with having special teams episodes, but I don't think they should all be teams. That's a big sticking point for me with this, because it kind of takes away from the spirit of the original, I think. Plus, having the partners throughout kind of changes the dynamic of the course, like, especially with the middle round, the gauntlet, because they're kind of waiting for each other the whole time. It just feels less like a real race, because they're just standing around waiting. And also the wipeout zone, where they, it's like a relay, so one player does the launch in the first obstacle, and the second player does the other two obstacles. It makes it feel a lot less like of an achievement to complete it, because you're not doing the whole course, you're just doing half of it. And one person's only doing one legitimate obstacle, because the first one is just getting launched into the water. So yeah, that's kind of, I'm guessing it's some kind of budgeting, time management strategy that they're doing, but I don't think it's worth it, because no one really likes that strategy that I've seen. It's still better than the season 7 thing where they skipped the obstacles once they wiped out, which was just a horrible decision. But, it still doesn't mean that they need to change it more. They could just go back to the original seasons 1 through 6 rules, because those worked, and that's what people liked. So yeah, basically the partners change the dynamic, and aside from that, it's just good to have individual episodes, I think. I find the people more memorable when they're not on a team, I think, when it's just a single person. Especially with these new teams, because they force these gimmicks on them, which on the original they did that, they gave nicknames and stuff, but this one it's like they have these like video packages that they have in advance where they give themselves like a thing, like what have we had so far? I don't know. We have one team that liked milk, we have one team that's surfers, and it just feels like a lot more forced than the original show, having those like intro videos like American Ninja Warrior has, and it's just unnecessary. I mean, I think it's pretty clearly inspired by ANW, but it's not, again, it's just not, it doesn't really fit the show, especially when you have Camille there to interview the players anyway. It's like, just do more of those unscripted interviews, I think. Plus, I feel like they stole to show a lot of the qualifiers, so they could just cut those intros out in favor of more obstacles and stuff, so we could see the teams run more of the course. Because that's another thing, like, the first contestant on the original show would always run through the whole course, or almost always. They'd show them run the whole course to give you like an idea of how each obstacle works at the start. But this one, they'll just cut, wherever they want. They'll skip the first obstacle, skip the big ball, skip whatever they want, basically, to right away. It just makes the whole qualifier feels really choppy, because you don't really get an idea of the whole sequence of obstacles. And it's a small thing, but I think it impacts the whole show. So I hope they'll think about that in the future, and just showing a full run to start with. Even if you just show one teammate on each obstacle, it would still give a much better idea than this, because I feel like it's improved over the weeks, because we've seen 6 episodes at this point. Episode 1 was really bad, and it's gotten slowly better, but it's still not up to the par of the original show. And I know they don't want to follow it like, follow the format verbatim, but there's some things that might seem small, but they make a big impact on how the show feels, I think. Certainly for me, anyway. Also, in the qualifier, they have, this is probably my biggest whole thing, not just the qualifier, the whole show. They have hardly any variety in obstacles. So for the first 10 episodes, which is what we're going to see going into the summer, we've seen 6 of the 10 so far, all they change is they have 2 different starting obstacles, one over the pool and one over the mud pit. They always have the big balls, they always have the body blender, then they have the jiggulator, which they'll change a little thing within it. They have a hurdle, or they have like a block that you climb over, and that's it for the qualifier. That's the only change you get. Then the gauntlet, which takes up 3 whole pools of the course. All that changes is that last week they replaced that orange ball that you hang from with a dangler, which it's a change, which I was excited to see something. But I think it's more of a necessity change, because no one was using that orange thing, unfortunately, because it was just so much harder than the other grips. So it was more of a change out of necessity, I think. But that's all we have for the middle round that changes. I'm guessing we'll have more Dangler episodes coming up, but I don't know. And then the Wipeout Zone is the same 4 obstacles every week, no variation, nothing, which is really hard to watch every week. Even if it's a short segment of the show, it still needs to have some kind of, even if it's just putting foam on the obstacles or throwing balls at them, like, do something. It feels a lot, because that's what the original seasons of Wipeout had. The first 3 or 4 seasons had lots of variation throughout the show, and it just made the whole episode feel unique every week. And this time, especially since we're not alternating between courses, we're just on one course for the whole time, we could really use some of those little changes to make it feel fresh. Because, you know, it's kind of struggling because of that. And a lot of people are more concerned with the hosts, I think, because, I don't know, it's just a more obvious change because you see that from week 1. But as you watch every week, you can see that the variety is a real issue too. So I'll run through the course, I guess. So the first obstacle in the episode 1 was the sweep and weep, which is basically jumping over these sweeper bars. You have 2 paths. You have one that's like a curved beam, and you have one that's like these little steps that you can run across, which are more direct, but they have gaps in them, so it's kind of a trade-off. I like having the different pathways, I think, but what annoys me is that the sweepers raise up as you're jumping over them, which is just like a smack wall to me. It makes them hard for no reason instead of being like a fair obstacle. So that's kind of annoying. I think we've seen one person beat it, but he has jumped way higher than the bar could raise, I think, which is good. Then we have the Nutcracker, which was in Winter Wipeout from the original show, but this is just like an unthemed version. It's kind of ugly looking. It's like pink and yellow and green. And it's just a smack wall, so you know how I feel about that. And there's also the first part that I guess is the Nutcracker. It like kicks out of the wall at you, but it's a lot less effective than in the original show. But I mean, it seems possible if you kind of fall at the right moment, like if you fall underneath the smack wall. Maybe someone can accidentally fall under it, so they can pass it. That'd be nice. Because as of now, it's just a pointless part. And they barely show it in the 3 episodes we've seen it so far, so, you know, at least we don't have to deal with it too much. Then we have the big balls, which I think the big balls have shrunk since 2014 because they definitely look smaller. Smallsy's still on the last ball, which I think they could have gotten rid of, because that gimmick got old after season 5, I think. I think he's only worth $500 now. No, he's only worth $250 instead of $500, maybe? I don't know. I think they have both the prizes, the grand prize and the Smallsy. But anyway, the balls are still going downhill like they did in the last couple seasons of the original show. And the motivator is still the same. And it just feels like they could have done something to freshen them up, even if it's just a different motivator or no motivator. It just feels like they got really lazy in the original show with the balls, and I feel like they could have fixed that here, but they've just kind of jumped back where they were, so, you know, whatever. They don't show them very much compared to on the original show, I think, but they still show them a decent amount, so it's just interesting to see how they prioritize the course. Speaking of which, next up is the Body Blender, which is by far the lowest shown regular obstacle, I think. Like, there's some episodes where it's only been seen once or twice. It's probably the most fair obstacle they have, maybe aside from the big balls, because it's just, you hop across these rectangle platforms, and as you go, you have to jump over this bar, basically just like a spinning, you know, hurdle bar to jump over, and there are these hoops to jump through. It's kind of like the Poundabout from the original show, which also didn't get shown very much, and it's actually a good obstacle, but it's just, they prefer showing the other stuff. So that's kind of a shame, I think. Then the last obstacle, which is the one that they love showing, is the Jiggulator. It's kind of like the Rumble Room from the original show, where they had this big shaking room with like hurdles and pop-outs in the wall and stuff. And the main challenge comes from, well, actually it's kind of even. I'd say it's mainly the pop-outs on this thing that are tough, but also the final leap is difficult. It's pretty big, but we've seen one person do it, which I appreciate at least seeing that's possible. But that was a few weeks ago at this point, so I don't know. They always do the same, like they shoot slime at you, I think. Spray water, maybe? I'm not sure if they spray water. But yeah, I feel like they could reserve that for some weeks only, and that would be another way to mix up the course, because it just feels so samey right now. I think that's something that they might realize after this block, like that they have to mix it up more. Hopefully, I don't know. I hope so, because they suffered with that on the original show too. In seasons 5 through 7, it was like I wish they realized that was a big issue for the show. And as I said earlier, sometimes it's like a larger platform to climb over, and sometimes it's a smaller hurdle. I think the large platform makes it harder because you have to jump off the steps coming down it. But it's kind of an inconsequential change, especially since it's like the only thing they ever change. So yeah, at least they vary it something, but we see it so much that it's still getting really old. Yeah. So then the gauntlet, which is kind of a really big round that they're advertising, because they got rid of they only have one middle round this season instead of the traditional 4 rounds. They only have 3 this year. So instead of like a smaller course, they have one that takes up 3 whole water tanks from the original show. The first segment of this is called the carousel. It's basically, first they start on the high platform, then they have to drop onto like a fat sweeper bar. It's interesting. I mean, we've had that concept before in the original, but I think it's interesting enough to pass as something original. I like it. And then next up they have to grab a handle and swing over a sweeper bar to a platform on the other side. It's like a hanging apparatus. And the options are a ring, like a trapeze handle, I guess, an enclosed handle, which is pretty similar, and then we've had either the orb, which is a big like orange ball shape, or the dangler, which I know I mentioned these earlier, but basically everyone likes going for the ring because it's easiest to hang from. So I like that they give people the option, because that's kind of an interesting idea. But I think it might be better if each week they'd choose 1 or 2 of the grips to use, because that would achieve more variation and also force people to use some of the tougher ones instead of just going for the easiest one to hang from. Like if we had one with all those orange balls, that would be really tough. I don't know if they have 4 of them, but they could use 2 of them, and it would be good to see people try it, because we haven't seen one person try that yet. And again, that would just be another way to mix up the course more. Then next up is kind of interesting. It's the messy mile, but the anomaly here is that you can't really wipe out on most of it. It's just it's like a mud run obstacle race where you just kind of climb through stuff. So they brought back the wall squeeze, which it's like a thin hole in the wall that you have to squeeze through, and there's no way to like fail it, but you can't lose time on it. So you gotta fit yourself through and climb out. And then we have the zip lines, which you can kind of wipe out on, but I think if you wipe out, you just move ahead. You don't have to redo it. So you zip line down this track, and then you have to dismount and time it really carefully, because the platform's kind of far away from the end of the zip line, so you have to use your forward momentum to zip over, or otherwise you fall into the mud pit. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Okay, then we have these like round hurdles that they can climb over, and they're supposed to be really slippery. Like they spray slime at you to make it hard to climb. We don't see much of these. Actually, we don't see much of the messy mile altogether. Like, it's hard to. I'm trying to remember the whole sequence of it because they hardly show it. They just show like a glimpse of it most weeks. One week they focus on it more, but most of the time it's just a quick look. And there's mud around most of this, by the way. That's why it's called the messy mile. But I can't really remember how it's arranged because we hardly see it. And then last up is Mount Wipeout, which is interesting, but again, it's like there's no way to fail it. It's basically just foam structure with like little ledges on it that you climb up, and as you climb, a water tank drops on you, and then you jump over it, and you have to jump off it into the pool and then swim to the next section, which is kind of weird to me because I feel like they should have connected it, but I guess they didn't really have the budget for that if they can't modify the obstacles even. So yeah, so that's an interesting section, but I feel like they should have. I feel like doing this 3 rounds in one idea is kind of bad because they can hardly show any of it. And instead, they could have just had 2 unique rounds or 3 unique rounds instead of this. So hopefully next season they ditch the gauntlet idea and they just go back to the traditional 4 rounds, like each episode, or just have alternating middle rounds, you know, because again, more variety. And then the last section is the pummel pool, which also has some kind of interesting things. It has two like big balls in it. So first they have to like hop on this red ball, and then onto the seesaw, which is surprisingly it's non-mechanical. It just tips when people get on it. So that's an interesting, you know, difference than usual. Then after that, they have a choice between the French fries or the lollipop. I think it's interesting that they're giving, you know, that they can choose between one or the other. And it's not like a really obvious decision which way to go, which is good. So we get to see some of each obstacle. One is basically like these spinning blades that you have to run past. You know, you have to time it properly. And the platform needs you slides, so you have to also be careful of that. And the lollipop is basically just like a spinning, like a turn, you know, it spins like a turntable, but it's just a narrow stick that you have to cross. And you have to dismount carefully because it's a thin platform. So yeah, I think, again, I might say just have them do one or the other each week. Because again, that's more variation in how the course is arranged. But I do like the idea, in theory, of having the choice. Especially when the choice is kind of hard like it is here. And people have trouble making up their minds. It's kind of interesting. Then the last obstacle is really, I don't know why they did this. It's just a big ball, and then right next to it is a landing ramp. I would say you'd have to try really hard to fail it because there's like no gap to fall in, and no one's wiped out on it in 6 episodes. So it's a really anticlimactic end to the thing, and it's just, I don't know why they didn't, after a few episodes of it not working, I don't know why they didn't do something to make it different, harder. But I guess again, it's just budget. So the problem with this giant course structure too is that it's rarely ever like close, because it's so long that people get separated pretty quickly, and then it's almost always just one team in the pummel pool finishing, which is unfortunate because they have to do some weird editing to make it look closer than it is, so there's at least some kind of drama. But yeah, it's not ideal to have that, and it just seems like kind of I know they wanted something to be different from the original show, but it just seems kind of extra. Yeah. Then the Wipeout Zone is kind of the opposite of extra because we only have like 2 course runs because it's a relay format for each team. So the first obstacle is the silver bullet, which is kind of a traditional like speeding launch into the zone. Like you lie on it and it launches you forward and you fly into the water. It looks, you know, it's a decent launch, but nothing too different from the original. Then we have the vertigo, which is basically the sinister snowflake from season 5 winner of the original show. And just like that, you have to climb to the center of it to hit this button. And when you hit the button, the platform lowers and you can jump off onto it. Most people just have trouble getting onto it. That's the main issue with this obstacle, which is kind of similar to the original version. It seems challenging, like, to do, and having to climb to the middle to hit the button is definitely what makes it tough, as opposed to just riding the top of it. So, you know, I think it's a decent obstacle, but considering it's the only obstacle that the first teammate really has to complete, it's kind of, you know, again, they should do the whole course, not just one or 2 obstacles, because it's just, it doesn't feel the same, and it's way too quick. They pad out the zone with a lot of like talking and stuff too, because it's just 2 runs. So that's another thing that they could see, like, we need to run four people instead of 2. It just doesn't work as well. Then we have the first teammate tags the second player who's standing on the platform, and he goes or she goes to take on the leap of faith, which is kind of like simple for a third obstacle, but it works. You have to jump off the platform you're on to a lower platform that's spinning really quickly past you, and you have to land on it. It's pretty tough. Like, very few people make it on their first shot. And you have to time your jump off to a landing platform. It kind of reminds me of, the first part kind of reminds me of the Wipeout game from Takeshi's Castle, because you have to carefully land on the rectangle. It's kind of like jumping onto a surfboard, if anyone knows what I'm talking about. And then you have to, the dismount's not easy either, so I think it works. They probably made it partly because it's lower budget to make, but I don't mind it. I think it would help if they'd put a sweeper bar to jump over too, just to make it feel a bit more like Wipeout standards of complexity, but at the end of the day, it works better than a lot of things, so I'm not going to complain. Then last up is a triple threat, which is like the 4th time that Wipeouts use that name. They probably don't realize that, but it is. It's basically 3 triangles that you have to jump across that are spinning around. They kind of spin in an interesting way that's hard to line up perfectly, which is good. Oh, and triangles are kind of like on a pivot. They're hung by the center, so they pivot when you step on it. So it's an interesting balancing act. But the problem with this is that for some reason they let people stand on the back of it, like the hexagon backing, which is a much more stable surface to jump on. Especially when they're making the final leap, they just let you stand on the back instead of the triangle. Which I think some weeks, if they wanted to mix it up more, they could have you stand only on the hexagon or only on the triangle. But just having this is kind of, it feels cheap having them just jump off the stable part. So yeah, again, they could use that for variation, but I don't think it works well in this context. They claim that this is the hardest zone ever, but the most of the times make it seem like it's one of the easier ones. Despite having, a relatively difficult Season 5 obstacle in the Vertigo. And, the other 2 are pretty difficult too, but maybe it's just having to only do half the course, people aren't as tired. I think that's a big part of it. Like, people are usually really exhausted getting to the final obstacle, but here it's just like they're barely getting started. So it really changes the dynamic for the worse. So it's a strange decision to have only half the course. But yeah, that's my obstacle review, and this is going on way longer than I thought. But that's most of my criticism of the show. I just remembered. I forgot the alternative first obstacle to the qualifier, which is the spanker planks, which are these sideways rumble bridges that bounce up and down as you run across them. And then, if that wasn't enough mechanics, you have to avoid a smack wall at the end that hits you. So, we have seen people beat this, but it's definitely, more mechanical than I'd like to have on the course. Sometimes they won't move the bridges up and down as much, but I think they just want people to get to the end so they can get hit with the ball. So that's a shame. And I've seen this could be used 5 times, just like the sweep and weep and Nutcracker is. But I've seen one where people are holding like shopping bags while doing it, so I don't know if that's going to be like a variation, which at least is something, but I think it's going to be kind of weird. But I guess we'll see what happens when it comes. And then they have the Tosser Tumbler, I think it's called, which is, it's inspired by the marshmallows from the original show. You have to cross this stretchy material and jump over these swinging poles that are swinging at you. And we've seen this like very little. The past couple of weeks that they've had it, they've only shown it for the very first person, I think, and then in montages for a second. So I don't know why they're not showing it, because we don't see it nearly as much as like the Jiggulator. But again, it's kind of weird editing decisions, I think. Okay, now I'm done with the review of Wipeout. I think it has potential, but they need to stick to the original spirit of the show and really mix it up more for next season. So that's my hopes for that. The concerning thing though about this is that they have 10 more episodes filmed for a later time that I'm 99% sure were filmed with the same exact course, except the first 2 obstacles are replaced with 2 other sets of obstacles. Which, I mean, it's good to have different starting obstacles, but it's 20 episodes with the same exact course with no variation hardly is I think that's gotta be really rough. 10 episodes was more than enough, so I really hope they just did more than I realized, but I think it's gonna be the same. But hopefully they can listen to this feedback before they film any more and get it right. And I know I'm gonna keep watching every episode because I still like the show. Alright, so now we're on to Ninja, and since the season hasn't started yet, this should be a lot quicker, hopefully. The main thing that we found out about next season is that they're gonna do something new, where they have it's called split decision. So for the qualifier rounds, they're gonna have 2 balance obstacles instead of the traditional one. So people are gonna have to choose between one or the other. I think this could be interesting if they make sure that the obstacles are pretty evenly difficult. So we don't just have everyone choosing the same one. We could have some variety. And, I think it would be good to debut some interesting new balance obstacles here. Because if they've been picking up with the balance obstacles, but there's still a lot of the same repeats with like the spinning bridge and stuff. So I think it would be good to see more originality this season. And this would be a good reason to try that. So, yeah. But overall, I think that's a decent idea. I'm not sure, because I like the traditional, just like straightforward course, but I think mixing it up might be a good idea. I don't know. It's better than like the safety pass stuff, because I think that ruins like the quality of the, like a complete run, because you can just redo the course. So a change like this is a lot less bothering to me. And then for the semifinals, it's basically the same thing, where they have the ninth obstacle gets replaced by, so they have the traditional ninth obstacle, which is usually like a upper body sort of thing, and then next to it they have a really difficult balance obstacle apparently, which I'm trying to imagine what that would be, because they emphasize how difficult it will be. Maybe it'll be like a long slack line, I don't know. So basically people can choose whether to take the longer but safer route, the more exhausting route, or like a tricky but, tricky but less exhausting balance obstacle, I guess. So again, that could be interesting depending on how the obstacles are compared to each other. And I think at that point, usually the ninth obstacle doesn't matter, but sometimes it has come into play where only some ninth obstacle people advance. So it could be interesting there. So yeah, that's the main update for the next season. Also, they were gonna do this last year before this whole COVID thing started. They're letting I think it's 15 and up. It's either 14 or 15 and up compete on the regular show, which I'm surprised they're allowed to do, but I think that's cool because there's a lot of really good younger people. They must have lost my invite. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good young people that can try it, so I think it'll be interesting to see them. Some of them are a lot lighter than the adult competitors, so you never know. Maybe we'll see some really good kids compete. And, a much more sophisticated course than American Ninja Warrior Jr., which is basically a speed course. So yeah. And otherwise, just that there's going to be no audience again, at least. And I'm assuming there won't be any in Vegas. They haven't filmed it yet, but I'm assuming they haven't. But definitely not in the first qualifying segments, which is, I don't really care about the audience, but it's kind of depressing not having one because it just reminds me of everything. So, I would like to get one back sooner than later. Plus, I'd like to go to a taping next year if they have one in Florida. So, yeah. And the first is, we're still sticking to kind of like a all filmed in the same place thing, because the first ones are all filmed in, is it Tacoma? Yes, Tacoma. The qualifiers are in Tacoma, then the semifinals are in LA, and then the finals are in Vegas. So I kind of miss having the regions, and I hope they go back to that once, next year when we're back to normal, hopefully. But my main thing will be I want them to keep like they used to, like consistent regions with each their own obstacles. Because last year, I mean, it's understandable because they had to throw it together so quickly, but there was a lot of repetition between each episode. So I'd like to go back to each, group having its own set of obstacles, minus the traditional obstacles that are in every course. And having a semifinal for every qualifier instead of having like a joint combo one. But, I think they won't be as rushed for time this year, hopefully, so that they'll probably make that happen, hopefully. And, yeah, that's all I know about Ninja, about the upcoming season. But this Sunday, there's going to be a special all-women episode, which is filmed alongside all the stuff from last year. And the course got pretty repetitive by the end of last season, so I'm assuming this will be more of that. But it's been a while, so I think it'll be good to see it. And I'll be curious to see how they run that competition. And we can see some really good runs, I think. So yeah, that would be good. Yeah, that was a lot quicker. Then the other thing is that they recently released the promo for Holy Moly, which is a mini golf show on ABC. It's also filmed on the Wipeout set, so now Holy Moly and Wipeout are competing for Sable Ranch, I guess. But I'm glad that we have more activity there again. And the courses look really interesting next year. There's some stuff kind of like recycled from last year, but all of it looks really different. Like they brought back Volcano, but instead of the volcano theme, it's like a Christmas theme, which will be interesting to see. And they have the windmills, but they've made them like Double Dutch and Fuego, where it's like fire everywhere. So I'm curious to see how that looks. And yeah, it looks really fresh for next season. They do a good job of they do a really good job with the theming. And they also have some, each season they've had some original ideas. So yeah, I really like that show. I think it has a good future. Especially now that it's going international. Hopefully they can film more international stuff soon. But yeah, I'm surprised because season 1 was kind of repetitive. But last year they really stepped it up with having 17 different obstacles. So yeah, it made a really good show last year. Especially when nothing else was really prepared for the summer. And yeah, I mean, that's about it for my show stuff. Also, that Floor is Lava thing on Netflix, which I didn't love, but I'll watch it. It's coming back for season 2. Hopefully they have more variety this year. I know it's my common theme today, talking about varying the obstacles, but, it'll make for a much more interesting show, I think. And better pacing for that, because it was so long last time. It was so drawn out, having them cross the room over the lava. But, yeah, I'm glad that I have more stuff to watch again now. And I'm curious to see how how the summer goes, because there'll be lots of shows to watch, and hopefully I'll do another update at some point if anyone wants. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope this was informative. And I'll see you next time.